Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Sencast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. Each week on the podcast, we're talking about a different topic within the world of SEND to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools, and to empower parents. In this episode, we're discussing the power of relational practice in an autism setting. My guests this week are Beth Elkins and Ian Thorsteinsson. Beth is the head teacher at Gretton School, an independent school for autistic students. And Beth has worked in SEND for more than 25 years, working with a variety of needs. And Beth is a parent of a young man with PDA. Ian is the executive principal of Gretton School and some of the other schools in the Cavendish group. And he is passionate about life chances, removing barriers, and driving change around the support students with SEND need to thrive. The Sencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and we help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit students from birth all the way through to 25 with our Steps for Life framework that has assessment around functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And at the other end of the spectrum, for the most complex learners working within the engagement model zone, our engagement steps can build a profile for the students' needs and show the progress they are making, however small. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software. Now, let's get on with the podcast. On this week's show, we're discussing the power of relational practice in an autism setting. My guests this week are Beth Elkins and Ian Thorsteinsson. Beth is the head teacher at Gretton School, an independent school for autistic students, and Beth has worked in SEND for more than 25 years, working with a variety of needs. Beth is a parent of a young man with PDA, and Beth's passion for specialist education runs through both her personal and professional life, with the aim of making a positive difference in the lives of as many young people as possible. Ian is the executive principal of Gretton School and some of the other schools in the Cavendish group. And Ian has worked in SEND since 2004, and before that, he was in the Navy. Ian has worked internationally supporting SEND around the world, and he is passionate about life chances, removing barriers and driving change around the support students with SEN need to thrive. Welcome to the show, Beth and Ian.
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much.
So, today we're discussing relational practice in an autism setting. So, what is relational practice?
I had a feeling you'd ask me that. It's really difficult to capture in a soundbite. If I said it was basing every interaction, every conflict, every negotiation, every lesson, every social opportunity on the strength of the relationships that exist around young people, that's relational practice. And it's a lot harder to embed it than it is to talk about it.
So basically what you're saying is basically just living your whole life through the idea of treat people how you want to be treated. Don't see them as different, see them as equal, not I'm above you. Be nice, be respectful, share a bit of you, they share a bit of you, building those relationships.
Correct.
And I think sort of slightly wider than just focusing on the young people. It's got to be represented in the relationships between SLT and teachers and teaching assistants and teachers, as well as then the relationships with the adults and the children. So everything represents relational practice across the board.
It's a kind of moving away from a traditional hierarchical model, really. It's I'm fine, you're fine, and we're doing this together.
I'm having flashbacks to my days in IKEA.
Why?
I used to work there for 6 years in IKEA Croydon, and every person in that store wore the exact same uniform, whether you were a trolley boy or the store manager. It made no difference. And I got introduced by the store manager because I was flying past him skating on a trolley, which you shouldn't do. And he went, it should be quicker. It'll be quicker to walk. And I was like, obviously not, and skated off. And then went back. He went, it's quicker to walk, not in a authoritarian way or anything. Just said, it's probably better if you walk. And I went off and I said to him, who's that idiot? That wasn't my correct term, but that's what I'm going to say on the podcast. Like him, yeah. That's Lars. He's the store manager.
Oops. Yeah.
And it really resounded on me that he didn't say, I am bigger than you, I am better than you, or anything. He talked to me as if his opinion was the same as valued, the same as mine.
But why wouldn't it be?
Because you're taught all the way through school to do as you're told. Elders know best, and everything else is what you're told. And that my life at IKEA has just taught me so much. I love the IKEA way of doing things.
Apart from flat packs.
Oh, I love flat packs.
Yeah.
I'm like the Lego master builder. I'm the IKEA master builder. I can love. It's relaxing.
Okay.
They know how to do instructions. But anyway, let's get back to education.
In a nutshell, I have to say you have captured in a nutshell exactly why this school is different. Because you're right, we are taught at school that hierarchy is important, that I'm the teacher, you're the student, I'm big, you're small, I'm right, you're wrong. And that's why these students need a specialist setting that does something completely different. It's really, it's so powerful. It's so hard to capture in one thing because it pervades everything.
I'm glad it's analogous with IKEA, though. That's a whole new thing that I'm going to have to try and process.
But IKEA, but I'm going to stay away from IKEA because it was 6 years of my life where all these rules I was told by my parents, by everyone, that your elders know best. You must respect your elders. And all these rules got literally thrown away. And I end up learning new rules that actually you start off with that respect, but only a bit. And then respect has to be earned.
Yeah.
And respect can be thrown out very quickly.
And I think that's exactly the point. And that's probably why it's so powerful, is what we're moving away from in every sense that we possibly can is enforcing boundaries and rules. What we are actually moving towards is building an intrinsic desire to follow the rules within the person that then has to take that into their own adult life. Because in essence, at the most extreme point, if a young person leaves us at 16 or 18, requiring us to enforce boundaries, the only people that are going to do that after they're left are likely to be the police or the criminal justice system. So unless we do our job effectively and build an intrinsic desire to follow rules and an ability to understand why they need to follow rules and how society benefits from them and their place in it, then unfortunately we're setting them up to fail in their adult life or in their next stages. So that's the driver that we're trying to achieve here, really.
And that's the thing. It is very much that is a school and home is a really safe place to break rules and do something. The moment you leave those two places and you break a rule, you're going to get a very big consequence. So it's not about you must follow rules. Why? Because you've got to show them why they need to follow them. And generally, if it is a child who then smashes something up and then, well, you can't use that now. It's showing them actually that can have an impact on them and it have an impact on others and therefore how others will treat them. So therefore, it's actually breaking the rules isn't in their own best interest.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that then leads on to the fact that Gretton is now a school without consequence. And that's not
Without
with
sanction.
sanctions. It is, sorry, I knew I was going to get that wrong. A school, you'd edit that, please. A school without sanctions. It is very much a school with consequence, because literally what you've just described is what we work with. Is actually there is a consequence to every action, positive or not so positive. And it's about how do we highlight those and how do we enable and allow both the staff and the students to internalize that. That's probably the most challenging element that we've worked through at the school and that I've faced in many, many schools previously, is that because of people's history and the way they've been brought through the school system and their own parenting, we as adults expect that a child or a smaller person will do as we tell them. And if they do something wrong, they must be punished, because that's how they're going to learn, isn't it? And what we're moving away from, which is more about how we work and try and rewire some of those responses in the adults in the building, is around actually yes, you were probably felt a bit disempowered in that scenario. You expected to be in control because you're the adult, but you weren't, because the child removed that control from you by their behaviour. The reaction to that isn't always they must now pay for that. It's actually, what are we both going to learn from that? How do I not put myself in a position where I can be disempowered by using my intelligence and experience and training to give the child options that both are okay with me? And how do I then recover a situation and repair a relationship with the child where I'm now thinking, actually, it's gone wrong? We both share some responsibility in that. I acknowledge my responsibility. Now we work with the young person to acknowledge theirs. So it's a really complex thing to try and achieve. And I think the guys at Gretton have done a phenomenal job in getting to that point. It is natural that those responses still come out because it's so hardwired into us. But it's about how you then engage with that process and how open-minded you can get the whole team to be reflective, because reflection is at the core of all of this, particularly for the adult.
Mm.
One of the things I found as my children were growing up and I do my parenting, but also as I my role at B Squared increased and I started to run the company, I literally just went, parenting is managing. Managing is parenting. So all the stuff I kind of do with my kids, there's things I do as a parent which work well, I do in the company and it works well.
Mm.
But if someone's a really rubbish performance and I looked at the things, they're not doing this, and I tried to fire them because of it, and they turned around and went, yes, I am rubbish at that, but you never gave me any training. You never ever gave me a chance to learn about it. You never actually gave me any time to spend on doing it. Therefore, that's why it wasn't achieved.
And the first time you told me it was wrong is when you fired me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then that would go straight to ACAS and I would lose.
Yeah.
And then I sat there and went, yeah, my daughter's just had the opportunity or just experienced something the first time and made the wrong decision. But how does she know what the right decision was when she's experiencing it for the first time?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
And I literally just went, yeah, parenting is basically like employment. It costs the same. But if you think of it that way,
increase income now, does it, Dale?
No, it doesn't increase income, but you have to you spend that much money on them, and they do create stress. If I see it that way, as you were just saying, Ian, is when you're disagreeing, when you're sitting there, you're going, well, it's partly me, it's partly you. I did not communicate what I needed from you, and you didn't have a chance to communicate back. It's like that's the same as your staff.
Well, I mean, I would definitely say that Archie, or being a parent to a lad with PDA, has taught me a huge amount about parenting and relationships, and not doing that hierarchy thing and not doing the expectation thing, because there's absolutely no point. You have to find a different way. So in the school, I am profoundly uninterested in punitive approaches. I'm just uninterested in them. They are adversarial, they are stressful, they are ineffective, particularly with this cohort of young people. Our job is to get under the skin of the behaviour, try and work out what it is, what's causing it. I've said to the staff, your job is to be a very, very unique person for our very, very unique people. And that means stepping outside of what you've known, what you've learned, what you've always done, because these young people have fallen out of those types of settings and they need something different from us. And we did in the early days, didn't we? And we were really struggling with the narrative of, but they're getting away with it. We're allowing them to behave in certain ways. We're giving them permission to. And even now, we've still got some children going, it's okay, we can do what we like, because all they're going to do is talk to us. And I just smile wryly to myself, because I think you won't yet understand that really difficult conversation where we hold that mirror up to you is actually far more uncomfortable than detention would be in a mainstream setting, because we're asking you really to think about yourself and your own responses to things, which is really hard to do.
And I think,
and also,
just sorry, Dale, just to continue that point, I think when you consider that in the vein of the young people that we work with and significant numbers of young people in every school and every setting, when they have experienced trauma in their lives, which all children experience trauma, whether it's significant and adverse or whether it's just actually I'm getting things wrong and I'm stressed. The patterns of behaviour that appear in young people where they know, actually, I'm going to do this, then I'll get a detention, then I'll come back, is just a process. And they almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So they know what the consequences are going to be. They weigh it up and they do it anyway. They take the consequence, then they come back and do it again. I did it when I was at school. I wasn't the best student at school. I was excluded at school. I just
Shocking.
walked the line, essentially doing what I wanted to do because I was dyslexic and undiagnosed and wasn't able to engage in lessons. And that whole remit, I was one of our kids. So I knew the consequences. I'd take the consequence. I'd have a couple of days off. Great. I watched daytime TV. I was able to try and catch up. Then I went back to school and I'd do it all again. Had this approach been in place for me, it would have been the most painful process I've ever been through. Having to reflect on my behaviour and understand and start to understand why I was doing it would have been the most painful process anyone could have put me through, but it would have been incredibly developmental. I had to do all of that myself as an adult.
But that process is, you're looking at half of the process, and that half of the process is the kind of when something goes wrong, and you're in that cycle. I was very much at home and at school, gambled on the consequences. What's the likelihood? Quite low. I know what will happen. I'm going to do it. Or even if it was quite high, if I weighed up, but I still want to do it, I did. I was just like you, Ian. But that's only half of it, because you repeat that loop. But you are never changing, because no one's ever spending any time telling you are worth my input, you are worth my time to actually talk to and understand you, to help you change.
And an adult saying, we're in this together, because actually your behaviour is also my responsibility. So let's work on this together. We're both getting this wrong. Where's the point at which we can start to make progress together?
Yeah, because the thing is, if you're going around in the circle, maybe on the third lap, you should be going, okay, we need to change something.
When it does, it changes for the worse, because the behaviour then starts to step up. I need to raise my game. I need to do more. So they're in this really, really bad cycle of trying to shock. And our students will still try and shock. I mean, I've had a few learners calling me choice things, and I'm like, well, we'll chat about that tomorrow when you're calmer. Because actually, it's something that you need to learn isn't going to be okay in the future. And I'm not going to write you off because you've done it.
And I'm not going to escalate it now, because clearly you're not in an emotional position to be able to take that. But I'm going to come back to it, and you know that I will.
I mean, Ian and I were right early days. We were trying to work out, what do we do at Gretton? What's that narrative that we want to kind of get to, that we do this at Gretton? And Ian came up with this beautiful phrase. I've quoted him so many times since, and I have the image that goes with it, which is, we hold the learners in positive regard no matter what. That actually they can make mistakes, they can make poor choices, they can display really challenging behaviours, and somebody is going to be a champion for that student. Every student here has got at least one champion, somebody who will just be in the room with them, having those difficult conversations afterwards. I mean, the learning, reflective conversations that happen afterwards, they are really tough for students, but they do them with trusted people. And there's so much stuff that I've read and researched about this kind of psychological approach. There's so many sound bites, but there's one particular TED talk which talks about being that available adult, the person who can notice a young person coming through the door in the morning, and even by the cast of their shoulders or the way they're holding their head, they know how they are. To know the kids here that well, that somebody can just pick up the nuances of their presentation and know they're going to need something slightly different this morning. That's what enables children to kind of start to sit comfortably in their own emotional state, to be able to recognise it, talk about it. We use statements of reality a lot with young people. So we'll say, I can see that you're feeling really angry today. You're kicking my shins quite hard at the moment. It's those types of things that you're just bringing to their attention in that present moment, without judgment, without blame, without anger, that actually makes them stop and think and reflect, which is very hard to do when you're a young person, a new person. I mean, I've got shoes older than most of the children here. They're brand new human beings on the planet, and they're neurodiverse. So of course they're going to need to be taught that.
And they've been through lots of things. And Ali Knowles, who's on the podcast, was talking about I can't remember the exact, children in trauma, parent fostering, adoption is kind of they are pushing you because they're waiting for you to give up.
Yeah.
So Ian's bit about no matter what is they are going, look, if I just push that little bit further, they'll give up like everyone else has on me.
And that's back to the self-fulfilling prophecy, is that everyone's let me down before, so I'm just going to take control of when that happens. So I'm going to push until you give up because I know it's going to happen. And it's only at the point when they're sat thinking, I can't push any harder. Right, I need a new approach now. Maybe there's something in what they're trying to tell me. And I think the other thing about that unconditional positive regard is that has to be reflected in the staff room. One schools in particular are, and I think anyone that's ever worked in a school will recognise and acknowledge that staff rooms can be awful places for how we talk about children. And I think one of the big things for me really is driving. It's not just about how we talk to children, how we talk about the children sets a psychological narrative for everybody that was in that conversation. So if you're sat in a staff room at lunchtime and someone is having a right old moan about a young person, everybody that's been in that room comes out psychologically altered in their attitude towards that young person. So when we talk about unconditional positive regard, the expectation is that it's not just about how we respond to and talk to the young people. It's about how we consider what's happened and how we talk about the children, because that also alters the whole staff team's approach to the young people. If we're talking about them positively, we will think positively of them next time we see them. If we're talking about what they did right today, not what they did wrong, people will be able to congratulate them for what they did right when they see them, even if they weren't there. So that narrative has got to be reflected throughout the organisation.
And it could be simple changes of, he only kicked me twice in the chin before he stopped.
Correct.
And that is,
yes.
And it's not like I got kicked again.
He's only bitten one person this year, and that's incredible. I mean, actually, weirdly, we do have those exact conversations. We can reflect, because with these young people, the changes don't happen straight away. Neurological pathways take a long time to reform. And that's the bit that I kind of remind the staff of. This is going to take some time. They've always done it this way. If you're going to get new pathways, they need to practice them. So I will ask staff to reflect on the long game. Just think back to last year where we were. Let's look at those incident reports. Let's look at where this young person and the narrative we were having about that young person last year was. And that's the incredibly, incredibly powerful stuff. It's what's changed at this school is the ability to just hold the mirror up sometimes to staff and say, don't forget when you're in the midst of transactional stress, which is that stuff that we're picking up all the time, that energy that Ian's talking about, don't forget to stop for a minute, take a deep breath and look back to where we were, reflect, think about it, take a deep breath and consider these young people from a position of struggle rather than behaviour. If you can start to shift, or they're really dysregulated today because they're really struggling, instead of they're on one today or they're kicking off. There's certain phrases we absolutely ban in the school just because of the connotations.
But you use that dysregulator, which I'm going to ask you about that. But that whole thing is of you get kicked in the shin and then he went, took himself off. You're like, cool. What did he do a year ago? Well, a year ago, he would kick me, do this, wreck the classroom, then do this, then do this. Absolutely amazing if that was just, it's a huge change.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think from all the things you're talking about, and I think this is the thing, I think mainstream
just to say
schools...
Dale, we don't advocate for our staff being kicked. We do try and avoid it, but sometimes it does happen.
We don't advocate, but we know that these young people will behave that way sometimes when they don't know what else to do.
I think
that's what we're teaching them.
My wife had her, she had her ribs broken last year by a child. She just got in the way, was not intent. And that's the thing. My wife went, oh, it happened, and was not at all, because she could see. And I think at your school and my wife's school, and I think in most special schools, you can identify, when a child is regulated and when a child is dysregulated. And you know that anything going on when they're dysregulated is not intentional, it's not directed, it's not personal. They're dysregulated, they're lashing out, they're doing things. Whereas I think in the mainstream schools, they do not see that difference. They just see a child. And when that child is dysregulated, they are choosing to. That needs to be punished. They're not seeing the difference.
Isn't that because they don't have those relationships? And that's why relational practice is very hard to capture in a soundbite. I mean, I don't think there's anything more painful, not physically necessarily, but certainly emotionally, than having your own child be violent towards you. I can see that pain in a lot of our parents' eyes and faces and lives. So our job is to kind of reach out to them, and relational practice then just starts to bloom. So we're actually wrapping our arms around the parents and the professionals that are working with those children and the staff that are working with those children, because, you know, I have that sort of philosophy that it takes a village to raise a child. I love that philosophy. I love that thought that actually you can walk into a room and very quickly do a check on the staff that are in there and see which ones have become dysregulated themselves and swap in with them. And you need a team of people who understand the power of transactional stress and its impact in order to be able to step in and say, go on, you go and have a cup of tea. I'm here. It takes some very, very remarkable people. And I would say that I have some very remarkable people working here. I'm very, very lucky in that regard. But it's taken a bit of a journey together, and it's about faith and trust and changes of hearts and minds, isn't it? To dare to do things differently from how you've always done them.
It's removing that pressure to achieve in a certain way in a certain time scale. Because you are going to achieve.
Although ironically it isn't, because we still expect high academic outcomes for our young people.
But that isn't your first priority. You've learned that if we can get them to follow rules, we can help them to be more regulated, be less dysregulated, to be able to bring them down from being dysregulated. If we work on all of that, the academic and wider achievements will follow.
And that's so exciting, because honestly, these children, they have the capacity to learn at a level that I've never seen anywhere else. Once they have figured out who they are, how they can be themselves and be celebrated for that, how they can express their emotions that can sometimes overwhelm them in more positive ways, they then turn their minds to, well, what can I learn? And honestly, it's like, if I could draw the curve, it would be, stratospheric. It's absolutely remarkable. They are so capable of learning to such significant levels.
And I think on average, the young people join us at least 2 years behind academically. Our assessment is very clear that we're very clear on the children that we believe will have the biggest impact on, and therefore fit in with the peer group and fit in with the structure of the school. But with very few exceptions, we make those 2 years up in the early stages of the placement, and we expect them to be sitting GCSEs and heading back towards mainstream post 16. If not, I mean, generally not to work. Our young people generally have got such a desire for learning, they want to carry on and they go on to do something else. So it isn't either or for us. It's actually, this is the tool that we use to catch up on their academic learning. I think that the two key pillars for us really are: the young person needs to understand society and their part in it when they leave, and what their barriers are going to be in society and how they can work around them. And our big job is to give them the certificates that are going to get them into the next level of their journey, wherever they want to go. They've got the qualifications to be able to get through the front door. So it's a real twin approach to getting the young people ready and understanding themselves and understanding society, and giving them the golden ticket to get to whatever they want to do in their future.
And I think those barriers, that's that kind of bit around, we talk about following the rules, but that we all go out in the world and something annoys us. And we generally over our time have developed strategies to either ability to walk away, go have a drink, or things like that. We've learned how to do things, and we've learned that actually, although right in this moment this is really stressful, if I take a little bit step back in the longer term, it's not. So we've learned all these things, but for your children, that's the bit that's making them dysregulated. And so it's a lot of your work is probably, if not saying you can't be dysregulated, it's helping them identify they are dysregulated and helping give them strategies on how to kind of come back, take themselves out of the classroom, go over all those sorts of things.
And work out the why of it without asking why, because why is a really, really tricky question. And so often, I mean, you say, why did you hit him? Because I wanted to. But yes. Okay. So actually we avoid that word like the plague, really. What we want to understand is what is behind this behaviour. And I've got to tell you, 99% of the time, it's anxiety, fear, confusion, misunderstanding. It's very rarely a plain rage. It very rarely is. You get underneath the skin of it, and what you work out is that the young person experienced something that they weren't expecting to, or they'd misunderstood something that had been said to them. And when you reflect with them, they're like, oh, and it's another bit of learning. It's another block that you add to their little catalogue. It's so powerful.
So you then adapt something to help them be more certain. And then at some point, somebody forgets that and it happens. And you can say to them, look, I do that. But if we don't, you need to tell us. And then you're giving them that power of them knowing what they need rather than relying on someone else, which again, all this stuff is preparing them for when they step away from you, going somewhere new, going somewhere, as Ian says, to kind of get them towards that life goal.
Yeah.
They can kind of have that self-agency. They can say what they need.
And actually, it's beneficial to everybody long term, because I've got to tell you, Dale, these are some incredibly creative, clever, knowledgeable young people. They've learned certain things to such deep levels that they will be experts in those fields. So if we don't enable them to become adaptable to the way that the society works, society's going to miss out on tapping that genius. I mean, we've got some very, very bright kids here. Fascinating, actually.
And I think just going back to your point, Dale, rewind right to the beginning of the conversation, which is our whole approach is to build an intrinsic desire to follow rules rather than enforcing rules, and an intrinsic understanding of why those rules exist, which encapsulates exactly what you've just said. Is actually, I need to be able to manage this. Yes, this is uncomfortable. What do I need to do? I can take myself away. I can process it because I have experienced something like this before. What did I do then? I won't just punch them in the face, because actually the only people that will come and do it now is the police. So we need them to be able to take those skills with them and understand why they need them.
And what's so lovely is that you've actually got students now saying, I used my strategies this morning. Like, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You've got the language for it and you're doing it. And that's like triumph. Honestly, it is absolutely triumphant. When we had we do zones of regulation, which is so valuable, and they kind of teach a young person how they're feeling. And so we use colour coding for that. Do you know about zones of regulation?
Interesting, the way you said it teaches young children. So I was going to ask you, do you do zones of regulation at them?
No.
Or do you properly teach them all about the zones of regulation with the lessons?
They've got markers in their workstations. They've all got workstations. That's their space. We've got some fierce expectations around respecting workstations, because each young person needs a place where they can go and be safe. And in their workstations, they've got zones of regulation. And, you know that it's really, really embedded when a young person says to a teacher, so you look a bit tired today. I think you might be in the blue zone. They've got it. And they are using it to be able to express themselves, even in that moment. Because a lot of our young people have got alexithymia. They can't identify exactly why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. We're looking at them thinking they're really, really rocking and rolling at the minute. It's probably because they need a biscuit. But actually, they can't tell you what they're feeling. They just know something's not right. So actually giving them a colour enables them not to have to name it in that moment. And then we can name it for them to say, they say, I'm really yellow today. And you're like, yeah, you seem really, really excited. You're quite happy, aren't you? But you're really happy. So things feel quite difficult to calm down, don't they? And by giving them that language, they then use it again the next time, which is so powerful.
I think the important thing is, oh, yes, you are yellow. Now, let's get you back to green.
Exactly.
That's not what we don't do. We don't go, let's get back you to green, because sometimes that yellow is a very valid.
It really is. Yeah. And validation is another thing that, this is why relational practice, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger when you try and explain it. Validation is one of the things that is so, so important. And another approach which we use here is PACE, which is a really lovely approach. And the acceptance of PACE is the bit where you just say, I can see you're feeling like that today. That must be really difficult. That must be really making you feel tired. I'm not going to try and change it for you. I'm just giving you that statement of reality and accepting that that's where you are at the moment. And the safety of that. I mean, people are in relationships, people who are listening to this, you think about your most comfortable relationship. are the ones in which you can just be silent if you need to be silent, or have a good old rant if you need to have a good old rant. And you know that person, that safe person, will just accept what you need. We're trying to create that in the school with everybody that's around these children.
Including the staff.
Including the staff.
And that's, again, it's all in every school, it's got to come from the very top, because how the head teacher is supporting their leaders, how their leaders are supporting it, it is a complete waterfall of, if you are that person who owns up and says they've made a mistake, if you're that person who doesn't shout at someone when they've made a mistake, if you're that person who's really doing all the stuff, if you're modelling all of that, it will trickle down all the way through, and that is how your staff will treat the students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas,
I mean, students will sometimes call me Bethy Wethy Doodah or other things. One young man, I won't say his name obviously, but he shouted over at me once. He goes, "Oi, Elkins!" So I turn around. Yes. And he's like, "Sun's out, guns out."
but the thing is,
oh, it's so lovely that they can talk to me that way.
when I hear things like that, to me, that is the biggest compliment you ever get.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Just being oi, Elkins, and then it's like, cool. So that means that you're not scared of me, you're accepting, but at the same time, they know exactly who you are and will follow the rules you set and do everything. It's like, so it's not like we're best friends, and it is a complete level of respect of, you're there for me. And that's the sort of thing. I think people misunderstand what that sort of stuff is about, having names called. And there are teachers who, no, I am not your friend. I am Mr. Yeah, you're right. You're not my friend. Go away.
You've just destroyed a
relationship. I do not want to talk to you.
Or a child has just reached out to you and shown vulnerability to see how you react, and you've just stamped right on his hand. And how's that ever going to recover?
And again, in state schools, that pressure for that head teacher to achieve in their league tables, that gets passed down. And a really good leader is somebody who protects their staff from those pressures.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I hold my hat out to colleagues in the mainstream setting, because they have potentially are going to teach 180 kids in one day. If they've got a 6-lesson day, 32 kids coming in and out through those lessons, the ability and the opportunity for them to build the relationships that we're talking about in a specialist setting is literally non-existent. Yeah. And that's not a bad reflection on them. That's just the circumstance that they're working in. So I understand the challenges, but then how do we adapt around the edges for those young people that are falling out?
Well, I think it's there. You can't build that relationship with 180 children, but you can appear as a complete and utter human, with a personality, with an interest, with something they can pick up on. And if you support Arsenal, some of them not like you because they're supporting Chelsea or whoever, but at least they're into football, and they know they've got a joke, or you might be into whatever it is. But if you have something that somebody can go, actually that is a human being up there teaching me. They have a family.
Yeah.
They also have kids. Anything you can pull out from that person.
There is a vulnerability in that, isn't there? In a mainstream setting, there is a vulnerability to being human, when in fact a large part of what those teachers are needing to do is manage big groups of people. I think in that regard, we are incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to be able to have these relationships with young people. And there's some disorder in it. What that one needs is almost the opposite of what that one needs in the same classroom. And frankly, autistic people aren't always brilliant at making adaptations for one another's needs. In our school, we've seen that. And that's another part of the learning, and, sort of teaching them that actually in this moment, this young person needs this. What do you need, and how can we make that happen in the same space? Light on, light off. That's quite a tricky one to compromise on.
Yes, I bet. Or silence, or I don't like silence.
Yeah. But, that's the challenge, isn't it? That is the challenge of a specialist setting. And I think, we are really, really lucky to have the opportunity to work with these young people and get to know them as well as we do. But when I hear about, this push towards inclusion, inclusion is one of the things that these young people can't actually do. Inclusion in those types of settings is incredibly difficult for them because there's just too much happening. So that's the really hard part, and why I've got such a strong belief in these, in specialist provisions for these young people. Because this is what they need. And you can't even begin to imagine how many parents come here and say, it's just such a relief that we're somewhere where you get it. I mean, that phrase, again, is another really hard one to capture, but it's, you get it about my young person. How do you do that? How do you replicate that on a mainstream scale? I don't know.
And I think the word inclusion, and I've had some heated debates with local authorities, and when that point is coming up, we must include these children in the mainstream. I say, come and visit Gretton. You will find the most inclusive school that you will probably have ever seen, because we have got such a wide variety of behaviours, needs, diagnoses, and all of those kids feel and are included in everything that we do. It's slightly smaller numbers and we do it in a different way, but it is inclusive and everybody is accepting of each other to a degree. Sometimes they're not, but then we work on that through relational practice.
So my favourite definition of inclusion, which someone on the podcast said, and it was, it's not all the stuff you're doing, it's just, does that child feel included?
Yeah.
And there are some children, no matter what you do in that mainstream setting, will not feel included. And there's nothing in reality that you can do in that school without changing the whole school to change that. Now, I'm really hoping the curriculum and assessment review is going to change lots of things around the curriculum. So you're not forced to go through at such a pace or do things in a certain way, and a bit more flexibility. Now, I think that for some children will make a very big difference, and also for some teachers that will make a big difference. But it's not going to be a magic solution for everyone.
No, and even just visualizing what the mainstream is in its simplest terms. The mainstream is a big river that's fast moving, isn't it? The water's roaring. There's eddies all over it. There's water splashing up off all of the rocks as the water rushes through. Not everybody can survive in that environment, and we're on a little side stream that's coming off the river. We're connected. We're doing the same job. The water will eventually get to the same destination because it loops back in. But we're in slightly calmer water where we can focus on how do we get these specific children to that point, which is the same point that everybody else is getting to, with the same opportunities, with some additional work around their specialist presentation. But we'll get them there, and we'll get them there as a much more rounded adult than if they'd smashed off all of the rocks in that fast-moving river and probably lost consciousness before they got to their destination. It is as simple as that. We use the same word. We use mainstream. It's a fast-moving river that not everybody can survive.
No.
My wife
was
went back into teaching. No,
Yeah.
very much so. My wife went back into teaching after about 17 years last year. And she's like, I'm going to go back into teaching. And I said, you're not doing mainstream. She was an assistant head of a primary school. I said, I don't want you doing mainstream. I don't want you having to, I don't want the pressures. I don't want that level of work and stress trying to get this level of achievement. And I don't want you kind of having to support, battle, or however you want to phrase it, 30 sets of parents who are going, what are you doing for my child? And you know that actually of those 30, 15 probably will never contact you because they're just meandering. Then there will be another load who want the best because they're poor, their child. And then there'll be those who you're not doing enough for, and all these sorts of things. And she went into a school for ASC and ADHD. And she has 8 sets of parents who think she is literally an angel because their child is at school. Someone's interested in their child. My wife does daily emails or often phone calls and things like that. They're checking in and things like that. And my wife cannot do enough for them because, and it purely is, my wife has the time to build a relationship. My wife knows when those children are kicking off. It's not personal or anything.
Although we don't use that term.
Kick it off. I'm using the mainstream terms there because I think they are dysregulated. They're not attacking any. They are dysregulated. They are not in control. And my wife will just kind of, and they have the radios, but it is amazing that my wife has a TA for 8 children. The TA is not always there. And it's not one. There's no one-on-ones. It's not. The children do not need a TA.
That's not helpful in so many
It's
ways. I mean,
disabling often.
we've had a couple of young people straight from a mainstream setting where I have no doubt that they really needed that TA, and parents have kind of held on to, well, they had a one-to-one. I'm like, okay, well, here we don't do that, because we don't want them over-reliant on adults. There's always the same people in the room. You know, we've got 2 people who are working with these young people. They get to know them really well, but they're working with that group of 7. Because actually, young people have sort of started and you go, right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z today. And they just sort of sit there waiting for somebody to produce a pen and produce a paper. And we want to give them
Or
that
even answer
ability.
the question for them.
Yeah,
Often.
let's start thinking, I can write the answer for you, but you'll need to tell me what I'm writing. You know, it's that kind of expectation that you're going to participate in your own learning. I'm not going to do it to you or for you.
Drop in it. Ian needed to go get a tissue because he had a bit of a runny nose. The child who sits there and goes, yeah, I've got a runny nose, then looks at you waiting.
Yeah.
That can be what having one-to-one TA creates, is that they just sit there waiting, whereas it's getting them into, well, if you need a pencil, go get a pencil. If you need it, go get it.
Yeah, I suppose the flip side of that is where a lot of academy chains seem to be going, which is a really authoritarian Victorian behaviourist method, which actually, if a child's got a runny nose, they can't even go to the toilet during a lesson to go and blow their nose. So
No.
I just think it's going to be interesting because we are going to have the opportunity to look at research across some extremes of approaches, because there seem to be extremes appearing. The old children must be seen and not heard approach seems to be winning out across many, many places. So it'll be interesting to see what those generation of young people are able to achieve and interact in this electronic and digital age.
What's interesting is I had another memory of IKEA come back,
Oh, here we go.
and we had a new. I was lowly level warehouse man. I never dealt with the
Did
customers.
you get free meatballs?
No, but I did have a bath in them, but that's a different story.
Oh,
That really is a different story.
maybe that's not for public consumption.
Yeah, we'll do that after we stop recording. I'll tell you about
Well,
that.
I hope they didn't feed anyone those meatballs.
I hope not. But I had a supervisor came in, and he came in, I think, from Sainsbury's or somewhere. And he obviously came in with that Sainsbury's way of doing things. And he was kind of rubbing you up the wrong way. And I'm literally sort of going like, you don't need to be like this, in my head. And he said to me one day, and he'd only been here about a month at this point, and he went, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to get a job done. And I went, if I liked you, I'd do more work for you.
Amen.
And that was the end of the conversation. He walked off, and he came in the next day a different person.
Mm.
And I left IKEA in 2001, and he's still my friend on Facebook. And he's somebody, when he posts, I look, and it makes me happy that he listened to me in the exact same way you're talking. He was my supervisor. I was below him, but he said something, and I said something, and he thought about it, and he changed. That was just the most amazing thing, that it wasn't, you will do as I say. It was so many things went on that he kind of accepted he was wrong. He listened to me. He could change. I had a voice that could be there are so many things that change at that point. And I think I was like 18 years old.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal for me.
And I think, to put that in school terms, is that we're in this together. If you're with a child, me and you, we've got the same desire. We're both working towards your future, and we'll work out how to get there in the best possible way. Let's work that out together.
Yeah. Whereas I think some mainstream schools, again, this is not individual staff, it's that pressures from above. So my daughter's secondary school, they have a sixth form. If you don't get your 4s at GCSEs, you cannot go to the sixth form. You cannot re-sit your exams. You are gone.
Oh.
And you're like, but it was your teachers? Did you kind of let anyone know this might happen? Was there any support? Was there any, you're not going to make it and you've asked for a place? Was there anything before that? And it was like, no, that's your fault for you not passing. Bye.
Wow.
And it's just like, that's not right. Just the complete opposite of what I want. And my daughter is in year 10. I'm like, yeah, you're not staying on there. You're going somewhere else where you will feel valued.
Yeah, value is a really interesting one, isn't it? And actually, we've banned a phrase in this school, absolutely. And I think you could ask everybody here and they would know the phrase that I've banned is, I'm just a TA. No.
No such thing.
No. Actually, all you're doing there is either absolving yourself from responsibility or you are allowing people to speak to you like a lesser person.
You're saying you're not good enough.
Yeah. Neither of which is true, because actually you're the people that are the very closest to these young people. How you are with them, how you are in yourself is the making or breaking of a day at Gretton. They are so important as a group of people. And, I would draw my school. It wouldn't be one of those traditional organogram things. It would be a tabletop that actually the learners are right at the centre and everybody else is in circles outside of them. And my role is to wrap my arms around the edge of the table and just say, I've got you all. And relational practice is the table itself. It's almost the kind of the material on which we base everything else that we do. So that, when you asked me right at the beginning, what is relational practice? I'm like, well, it's going to take us a good hour to discuss this because it's so massive and so pervading. And it does take some very, very special people who need to be made to feel valued.
It takes courage to be that leader who kind of makes that change and brings it in, and then it comes through. It's a whole school change, and it will take time, and it will go. People perceive it wrong on the way because you're changing, you're removing these sanctions, you're letting them get away with it type phase, and then you'll get through that phase, and they now is going, I get it.
Get it. Finally get it.
Everyone,
and that phrase,
everyone fights it. So when you're starting that journey, you've just described it really well. But the staff fight it because they think you're taking away all of their tools. So and the best way to imagine it is that the staff team initially felt that they were there and needed weapons in order to be able to survive with the children. And what this change did was we're actually, let's take all those weapons off you. You don't need a knife and a sword and a spear. We're actually just going to go without. And
Cup of tea and a plate of biscuits.
well, exactly. Yeah. Just don't throw the tea. But it makes staff really vulnerable, and I understand that. And it's they then become charged with fear because how am I going to affect change now? Because actually that was the thing that I was used to affect change before. Not that the change was long lasting; it was probably not long lasting, but at least it made everyone feel better in the moment. So it's you get that pushback from the staff team because you've taken their weapons away, and the kids initially think, "Brilliant, free reign, we're off, right, running around the school."
The staff think they are more vulnerable because they don't have the
Yes.
weapons. However, if you look at the statistics of the number of people who get stabbed are the ones carrying knives, the fact you needed those weapons, you are very vulnerable. The fact you do not need anything apart from a cup of hot chocolate, which isn't too hot and you do not throw, and a plate of lovely biscuits, which covers every person's happiness of biscuits.
And some
You don't need
unconditional
it. So
positive regard. Yeah.
you're not going to get attacked. So you don't need any weapons. Whereas the fact you need those weapons, you felt you need those weapons, is you were going to be attacked.
Yeah. You're inciting violence by the very fact that you've got a weapon in the first place.
I mean, it's really interesting for me to listen to you talking that way, because I've heard the word rules quite a lot and I've heard the word attacked just then. And I was like, gosh, that's just not language we use anymore. We just don't talk about that. I don't talk about rules. I know there are rules and we're very clear about them here, and we're very clear about breaking them sometimes because rules are made to be broken, aren't they, sometimes? But when we talk about the language that we use around these young people is so interesting, because actually we have far fewer incidents and even fewer outbursts of that nature, even though the school has doubled in size, than we ever have. It's remarkable. As the school has got bigger, the number of incidents has reduced because of the shift in the way that we manage and support the young people.
And you probably even have the point, you probably have young people who've been with you for a while telling maybe new young people, don't do that.
Yeah. One of the leads in our school pantomime last year actually was talking to a group of parents afterwards, and he said, I used to really hurt people here. But then I learned my strategies, and now I don't do that anymore. And I was just listening to that, just got that little warm glow, because you're like, when you start to have that language coming out in the learners themselves and they can recognise the change, I mean, that's when it's really, really embedded, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of my most emotional scenes at Gretton was walking past one of the primary children was clearly had been having a difficult morning, bright red, covered in sweat, hair all over the place, buttons ripped off the shirt, and he sat on the floor panting next to one of our sixth formers. And as I walked past, the sixth former just said, "I used to be like you. It's going to be okay, you know."
Well, I think at B squared, we're not at all like a school because there's a lot less stress going on, a lot less demand, a lot less running around. But I sit in the same office as everyone else. I do not have my own office. I sit at a desk. If someone walks in, and especially the fact I'm just in jeans and t-shirt, no one ever expects me to be the boss. If you come to me on a stand, I go, "Hi, I'm Dale." Nothing said after that. Yeah, my job title, anything about it, that should not impress you because it doesn't matter. What I say, how I say it, my actions are the bit that you should decide whether or not you should listen to me and whether or not you should respect me. And all the stuff you've been saying about your school, that is, I'm not just a TA, is yes, everyone has their job title. It's hidden, but you are one big team and you're all part of that team. You're all doing the same bits. If your TAs all disappeared, your teachers wouldn't be able to focus, would do their job. If all the teachers did, it's all intrinsic. You cannot remove one of them. And the job title doesn't matter. You're all valued.
But that's why relational practice, I mean, I talk about relational practice and it becomes really difficult. I would, the tabletop is it. It's the very fabric of what we're doing. It's whether or not we put our dirty cup in the sink and leave it there for somebody else, or whether we wash it up and put somebody else's in the dishwasher as well. It's right down to those individual actions, the consideration of your behaviour and language on somebody else, no matter what. You're thinking all the time about somebody else's response to you and to your behaviour in the school. I mean, sometimes people will say, "Oh, is it right if I sit in your chair?" I'm like, yes. This is just a chair, you see. And they're like, "But it's the boss's chair." And I'm like, wow, it really still absolutely fascinates me that there are people who still think that. And somebody said to me last week, people are still a bit intimidated by you. I'm like, why? They haven't spoken to you. One of my colleagues said we should have Beth cam so that they could actually see that you're a human being and they should just watch you all day.
I'm not sure that'll get through any editing process, but
it would be at all interesting. But what he meant was that once he'd kind of got to know me, he understood that that head teacher, the use of the title, it just kind of gets swept away with I'm still sitting on the floor with you. I've still been punched in the face myself. It's okay for us to share this experience, even though I'm doing a slightly different job in this school now.
And it by no means lessens your authority, accountability, responsibility. It's just a different way of bringing people along to share that with you, which is what a team's for.
It improves everything, because if you're kind of scared, and I know that when I was 20 something and I started working at B Square and I go to my first school and they say, "Oh, can you just come in here a minute?" I'm suddenly 10 years old again, walking into this head teacher's office who's asking for help. I'm 10 years old in a head teacher's office. I'm a full grown adult now, but it is that your experience as a child of head teachers and like Ian's experiences of him growing up being kicked out of school, that head teacher is very authoritarian, all this lot. They might have been good at their job, but if they changed, they would have been better. Because if you are that authoritarian, I'm not going to say anything because you're not going to listen, which means that strange perspective that I have or a child has or someone else has that could make it even better, you're never going to get.
Yeah, and there is some power in that language. Of course there is. I mean, I have to say, for the first year of being a head teacher, I was finding it really difficult to say that without the slightly nervous giggle afterwards. It's like, I can't be a head teacher. I'm still a child.
You couldn't say it for the first 6 months.
I really couldn't. I found it really difficult to say. And what I've worked out now is that when people say, "Oh, what do you do?" I go, "I work in a special school."
The title doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And, I've found that my husband will go, "She's a head teacher," and he'll do that, proud thing. And it just doesn't have the same meaning for me, because I'm very, very invested in the way that we do that. And I would not be able to do it without the team that I've got. I just would not be able to do it. We would not be able to do it. We would not be able to affect anything like the changes that we do without a substantially brilliant team.
And I think that people, well, not often, but occasionally have said, when talking about approaches like this, you mentioned at the beginning that I was in the Navy when I left school and spent 10 years in the Royal Navy. How do those two things match up? You obviously, the military is marching around barking orders. I'll just say, look at all of the Victoria Cross winners. Look at the people that have led people into incredible situations and won. They didn't do it because they were authoritarian. People didn't follow people over the top because they would get beaten if they didn't. They often followed people that they respected and loved, and that they had a really strong relationship and high levels of respect for, that often would put themselves in situations instead of their people in order to be able to protect the team around them and make progress as a group. So actually, it's not that different. The people that I respected in the Navy and the people that I respect in education have got the same values. We're all in it together. If you feel the need that you have to shout or enforce punishment on people to get them to act differently, then in my view, you've already lost, because you haven't been able to do what you should do in any other way.
And I like the fact in our small office, we have heating problems, you have air conditioning, we have random problems, and the engineer comes in and talks to me as if I am just a typical person. And I like that. When he calls me mate or, yeah, see you tomorrow, I like that. That actually, that is a compliment to me, that a person, I just work in a school, as you said it, Beth, I am just, yeah. And it's not, I'm putting myself down that.
No.
Yeah, it's, I don't need a title. If someone talked to me like I was director and oh, sorry, sir, and all that, not sir, but that level of, I would hate it. I would absolutely hate it. And I have been people who said, oh, well, you're the boss, so I can't say that to you. And I'm like, why?
Oh, but it
Do
is
not.
fun, isn't it? When you use pace, and when we use pace with the students sometimes, that playfulness bit. I say, do you mean milady? They're talking to me. You could call me madame. And they're all like, what? They look at me like crackers. But it's that humour. It's so, so powerful with these young people. I mean, all of the misapprehensions about autistic young people, that they haven't got empathy and they haven't got a sense of humour, it's just absolute
Probably
bunkum.
the
They are
most empathic population of people you can find,
Yeah.
to a painful
overwhelmed
degree.
overwhelmed by it. So yeah, and I think that's why when we started to think about how did we want this school to look, what was the vision for it, what did we want people to kind of absorb as the way that we do things at Gretton, it was going to be all along, it was going to be real, authentic relationships with young people through which you can then say, listen, I'm a human too, I've got vulnerabilities too, I get it wrong sometimes too, but you can't behave like that, even though you feel like that. The sort of teasing out of feelings from behaviour and getting them to understand that they are two separate things, that one is an overwhelm and the other is a choice. It's been all of that, the unpicking of behaviour through those really powerful conversations.
And we do get it wrong sometimes, and it goes wrong. And then we reflect and we work out where it went wrong, and we acknowledge our responsibility in that, and we move on.
And that's another thing, is that authoritarian boss never makes a mistake, apparently, do they?
All right.
But the moment you say, I get it wrong, we made a mistake, you're being human, you're being slightly more vulnerable, you're saying to others, look, you can make mistakes. And I say to my daughter, you can make mistakes, just don't make the same one twice. And I generally do. I make lots of mistakes, but everyone's generally a new one.
Yeah, likewise.
Right. I'm going to wrap it up there, because we have been chatting for an hour. I think we have covered what is relational practice. And it's about, we're all human and we're all in it together.
We are.
Whether you're in a school, on a train which has been delayed, in the queue at McDonald's, or anywhere else, we're all human and we're all in it together.
Yeah.
It makes a really big difference in education.
Massive difference.
So Beth's given me some information around PACE and some articles she's written. I'm going to see if I can get some links from Ian, because he hasn't given me any yet, so I'll see them. And I'll share those, as always, in the show notes, and you'll find them wherever you listen to the podcast, but also on the Sendcast website. Thank you for listening. So if you're listening to a platform that allows you to review the podcast or give it a rating, please leave a little review or give it a 5-star rating. Let others know what you think. And the Sendcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. And we are here to help show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we help schools to show progress at a wide range of abilities and ages. And we have a range of frameworks that suit students from birth all the way through to 25 and beyond, with our Steps for Life, assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and independent living skills. And for the most complex learners working within the engagement model, our engagement steps can help build a profile of their students' needs and show the progress that they are making, however small. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through how our assessment software can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sendcast. It is goodbye from me.
Oh, goodbye from me too.
She'd already moved on.
I'm so sorry, no, I haven't at all. I just, drifting in my mind. Goodbye from me. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
And that's a goodbye from me, and I'll continue to work on Beth's response times.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.